What's up, Rufus Nation? It's your boy, Rufus, and today I'm going to be coming at you guys with some rants, the first of which is going to be from Godfather. We're talking big rants here. We're talking Season 2 of Bojack Horseman here, and I watched it tonight, the entire thing. It was like 5 hours, and now I'm going to talk about it. Because it's unfamiliar to me. It's very unfamiliar to me. Everything I watched and by the way, if my first take is like amazing and it cuts out again, I'm going to fall into like a spiraling depression because I'm having on and off internet outages because Cox Internet is just dope. It's just unrelenting with its quality and commitment to consistency and service. It has just been, it's been incredible. My relationship with Cox Internet so far. But I guess you know what is a good internet service. You only know when it messes up. I'll try not to be too negative about it, but it's like, okay, buddy, kind of ridiculous how often we get outages, but that's kind of besides the point. Bojack Season 2. This one, we reeled way back. Because obviously, Bojack is, at least Season 1 was all about getting into the characters' heads, which it's still about, you know, it's more or less a character study with a more, I don't know the layman's term. I only know the term shantified, which is like the super B-hop, I think, thing. Digibro said it about March Comes In Like a Lion, but it's got like an ensemble cast, and it sort of dips in and out of, fixating in on their individual lives, and then they sort of come together at the end, and you kind of get that satisfying, cathartic moment, especially towards the end of the seasons where the arcs kind of like, they all line up, and then they all like clash, and they interact with each other, and then there's some sort of resolution, but because it's a very cynical show, that resolution often isn't without like some sort of compromise. That resolution isn't often without some sort of negative, some sort of negative side of the story. There's always going to be negatives. Gosh dang it. See, even now, I'm remembering back to how well-spoken and legendary I was in that first Bojack rant. I will never live that down. There has to be some way in the future where we can track back to every sound vibration that's ever been emitted from my vocal cords in a particular sequence, that there will be a way to there will be a way to effectively bring back turn back the clock and go to this moment right now, and they could know exactly what I said and how I said it. Sorry, not this moment right now. It's a very late night. I just watched all of BoJack Horseman Season 2. But the point is not that. The point, which I'm getting back to once again, because I'm very focused, is BoJack Season 2. Everything comes together, but there's always a catch. Something bad always happens. There's always a wrench thrown in the plan, and usually it is totally self-imposed. It's not like your average show where that's going to be thrown in by like the introduction of some new outside force. It's just usually the same old shite from Mr. Bojack. He be going in the circle, and he's stagnated. As they said in Season 2, Episode 3, I want to say. He's just kind of looping and looping and looping and looping. Because that's what Bojack does, and I guess that's part of the charm of this show, is that that's a sort of character archetype that isn't particularly conducive to storytelling. You have to have a pretty unique approach, and I think you do have to have that sort of ensemble cast to balance it out with a lot more, like the likable, charming characters, which can be more good-natured. Even if they're, still realistic. It's a hard archetype to make compelling in a long-form, like, storytelling format, such as a Netflix television series. But this show makes it work, and for that, it gets a lot of cool points, I guess, because it's definitely a very unique angle. It's a unique angle to take without being boring. I think back to one of my favorite games of all time. I'm gonna say one of my favorite games of all time. Gravity Rush 2. There was a moment which was supposed to like really emotionally convey the feeling of monotony and the feeling of uselessness, the feeling of stirring around in a circle and waiting to pass. You know, it was a whole thing, but she was royalty for a while. It's a crazy game. It goes everywhere. It's a really good game. And I need to make a video about it, or at least a rant at some point. But a lot of times when people try to do the whole like, oh, I keep ending up in the same spot, blah 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 blah, it ends up just being really boring. It's really hard to walk the line where you're actually like accurately conveying that sense of not moving forward at all, while still having enough of a narrative going on, not only to keep the viewer interested in the protagonist, but also to... Oh my gosh, sorry. Got something in my throat. Not only to keep the viewer interested in the protagonist, but, I mean, really just keep you interested in the narrative, keep you hopeful that at least something is going to develop, and all the while keeping the main character, reasonably likable. Sorry, this rant is very scattershot. I'm going to put my best foot forward right now and try to make the remainder of this rant highly focused. We're focusing up, squad. So, this season's interesting because, as I said at the very beginning, before I got distracted, and then I just started rolling down like this massive track of tangent after tangent after tangent. I sort of got like really far detached from where I was going. I was talking about how it's a really reeled back season. They talked a lot. This season had a very big focus on utilitarianism, which is definitely an interesting spot for the show to go because, as I said, it is a very character-focused drama. It's supposed to like more or less put you into the head spaces of these characters. And there's nothing about talking about utilitarianism or real life stuff that contradicts that at all, but it is definitely a noticeable, somewhat jarring, not necessarily in a bad way, but like very, very sharp and noticeable change in subject matter, because it is, the fundamental concept of utilitarianism is sort of stepping outside of your own head and stepping outside of your own emotions, which is a little bit weird, but I can't get into like this entire like giant moral system pontification or anything right now. I just have to like talk about Bojack and try not to go on these massive like sprouting like trees, branch after branch of random tangents that go to some random point that isn't particularly relevant. I got a Microsoft Defender summary. I said it was going to be more focused. It's more focused starting now. The utilitarian aspects they touched on in this one were of course, there was the subplot of Diane feeling like there's nothing going on in her life, but unlike, she's about to go on that same stagnation spiral because she just got married to Mr. PB, the Chad. And she's worried that her, like, her career and her aspirations are going to sort of fizzle out, and that's not a part of herself that she's willing to give up at this point in time. And so to counteract that, she finally takes that billionaire guy up on his repeated requests for her to follow him to, I forget what it's called, Cambonesia. I don't remember what it's called, but some generic war-torn country, apropos like Chechnya or something like Chechnya. And the other major way that it's focused on is there's an episode about chickens, the inhumane treatment of animals, and how even the quote-unquote humane farms and chicken plants are, at the end of the day, just pumping them full of hormones and, killing the chickens in mass. Like, if we're to concede animals to have some sort of valuable life essence comparable to that of a human, it would be an incredibly abhorrent, like, Holocaust tier tragedy, the modern meat industry that we're all just kind of contributing to. But if you take a stand against it, you're fighting the ocean. You're never going to make a difference because it's just so sprawling an issue. It's just it exists on a scope so far beyond what you can control, generally speaking, unless you have some sort of like platform that you think will be receptive to please for them to request, or for please to transition to veganism, which is not that much of the population. Me, I got my own morals. I don't think that the animals, God, it's always so bad to say, but, I think at the end of the day, the most palatable way I can say it is when they say they treat the animals good and they have a good life and then they, get them. I mean, as humans, my personal opinion has always been that we are more or less above animals, and that is a reasonably merciful treatment. We artificially give them a better life than they could feasibly attain in the wild, and then we kill them ideally without pain or without too much suffering. I don't think the consumption of meat is necessarily something that is like intrinsically immoral or anything like that. I think it's just an incredibly difficult industry to regulate, and once again, it's so massive, it's so sprawling that I don't know, trying to incite any change in that regard is probably fighting way too much of an uphill battle. But what the episode was getting at, and what the reality of the situation is that people just want to be able to enjoy their food guilt-free. So however far a rabbit hole you want to dive down into about like the finer moral implications of everything that you do and everything that you eat, the more somebody is going to have to be humane and publicly humane with their treatment of the livestock that they serve as food. Basically, whatever the average amount of concern that you're being immoral is pretty much exactly where most meat production companies are going to raise themselves to. Just enough so that you don't have to, or so that you don't feel concerned enough to the point where you're going to buy less of it, or you're going to feel bad about buying it, or you're going to spread any sort of anti-meat rhetoric on social media and stuff like that. But, not too much to where they're losing unnecessary money. Obviously, they don't actually care about freaking animal rights. But it's interesting, because this whole concept of utilitarianism is sort of the backdrop to almost this entire season, because in the entire season, another one of the major themes is everything always being about you, Walter White, Baby Blue, I did it for me, that type of thing. And, it sort of, it frames that in a really weird way, because the show is very, irreverent towards modern behavior in like contemporary first world Western society. It very much, is quick, and rightfully so, to call out the like moral hypocrisies and almost sometimes moral atrocities of just living in the first world from a utilitarian perspective. And I don't know, it's just interesting, because it seems to have somewhat transitioned past that, and that was just like sort of like the interesting theme of this season, and we got to see how the certain characters interacted with that concept and what that says about them. For example, Diane projected onto that her own desire to have some sort of meaning in her life, and that's the actual reason why she attached herself to that conflict, as opposed to any intrinsic moral obligation. I'm sure that was part of it, But I think the point of a lot of those side plots, there was another one with like allegations against Mr. Hippopotamus or whatever whatever his name is. Um, and that was a whole similar situation. It's just about like what twisted things, what odd things actually mobilize people to doing things that are moral, and doing things that are moral. Usually it's just looking like you're doing something that's moral. Usually it's just trying to sensationalize everything. Another theme that was like tied up that's pretty related to this is like at the beginning of the season, Bojack gets like a self-help book that's like where he's basically like just trying to shove it in everybody's face that he's like so much better, and that he has a really positive attitude now, and he's a changed man. And despite not actually making any changes, his number one priority is to like appear as such, which is a problem that a lot of people have, a lot of smart people especially. But Bojack isn't exactly the smartest, the sharpest tool in the shed. At times he could be pretty smart, but overall a lot of times his ignorance is played into for the sake of the plot, I would say. And it's definitely pretty glaring in some areas because he's pretty much impervious to all criticism and by extension all development of his knowledge base. So like I'm talking about it garrulously, but the point is Bojack's not a great learner, and he's not like some sort of like astute genius or anything like that. And so for him it falls apart rather quickly. But the problem that a lot of really smart people have that I've noticed is they whenever they have a problem, I mean, once it gets to the point where you're good enough at convincing other people that you've solved the problem, people will just kind of leave it alone and assume that you did. And of course that's just going to allow for the problem to get worse, especially like when you have an idea, when you really know what the problem is and you're really able to get to the root of it, and you're really able to get to the root of how to present yourself as having overcome it. That's when a whole new set of problems arise, as I talked about in my Monogatari video. But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in this season. It's funny how they I talked about in my last video how the animal gags are funny, and it's funny that they actually like pulled back the curtain in this season, and we're like, okay, yeah, they're funny, but like there's still like I mean, it's not real, there's still like a reality to this, like this is like a real societal issue. And there's like this whole season, which was like a really cool subversion. I actually liked that a lot. But there was like this season was just really serious, but in a way that I liked, in the sense that like it was pretty on the nose, but a lot of the things they were talking about were really serious, but they try not to be too I guess I don't know, edgy about them. A lot of these more liberal shows be very quick to make what is oftentimes valid, but what can come across to me at least as somewhat like edgy commentary that doesn't really have much substance except to be like, haha, this is stupid, or oh my gosh, this is terrible, like oh my gosh, and it just kind of, they don't go anywhere with it. But in Bojack, like in this season, for example, they talk about things like I don't know if the internalized racism thing with the chickens only understanding chickens was as intentional as I'm thinking, but it's something to think about. And obviously the glaring example is Bojack sewer slide baiting Wanda, and just the stand-in for that is autoerotic asphyxiation. It's definitely a lot of interesting stuff in this season. I like how they reeled it back more. The characters are becoming more developed. If I could just give a quick rundown of all the characters, Todd is more or less, he had multiple arcs throughout the series. He was sort of more of a side character, comic relief, sidekick to Mr. Peanut Butter for the former half of the season, but then as we got to the later half, he started getting more serious arcs. I mean, there was the chicken moment, which is pretty serious, and then there's the improv group where he essentially gets abducted into a cult, and then Bojack has to remember his friendship with Todd. I remember all those things. Bojack gets nowhere. I really don't think he gets anywhere. I feel like I just get the sense that everything that Bojack's learned in this stretch of episodes, he's learned in the past at some point and probably forgotten about by now, and now he's just learning it again, and he'll forget about it again, and blah, 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 blah. Cycle goes on until he, they get him. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty cynical. Princess Carolyn's love life is as doomed as ever. It's just... She has just put herself in a lose-lose situation. But who knows? Maybe she'll have the Francis Ngannou effect, and she'll bet on herself, and it'll be crazy, like 1 in 100 odds, and she'll just pull it off anyway. And then everybody's going to be talking about how everybody who was talking about how she fumbled the bag is actually stupid, and they don't know anything about combat sports. And they knew all the time. They knew the whole time, and they're so smart. But... yeah, I think that's what they were going for. I think that Princess Carolyn's arc was a direct allegory towards the multi-sport, decade-spanning career of Cameroonian boxer / MMA fighter Francis Ngannou. Ngannou forever.